much fun to introduce someone who needs no introduction. So it puts me out of a job. But anyway, we have in our midst a wonderful, wonderful man that we've known since we've been to Ann Arbor. Not only is he known in the media world, but we've seen him, a man with such a brilliant mind, but also a man able to articulate his faith so beautifully, or other truths he needs to communicate. And God has given him some physical challenges, which he's just embraced. I'm sure with difficulty, though, like all of us. But I just want to hear it from him. How did you get in the media? Thank God the Holy Spirit led you, I presume, into this, because you've done so much for so many people.
Well, Mother, thanks. That was a very beautiful introduction. I got into doing media largely because when I encountered Christ in 1974, I was a student at Michigan State University. I'd been raised Catholic, but I drifted away during the 1960s and had been in what we now call New Age thought. But eventually when I came to understand that the Jesus of the New Testament was very different than the Jesus of the New Age movement, I was stunned. My Catholic upbringing had been pretty minimal. And so when I began to read the Bible and realized that Jesus said things that they were shocking to me. I had assumed that all religions were essentially one. I had assumed that, you basically kind of work your way up to salvation. I didn't have any understanding of grace. And that Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. It was a shock because I believe the Bible. I mean, I believe that the writers of the New Testament were eyewitnesses, or they were close to the apostles. And so I took those as real words of Jesus. That was a shock. So shocking, pleasantly so, that I just started talking about it. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
I just started sharing the gospel, what God had done in space and in time to reconcile the world to himself. And I began to talk about how that had impacted and changed my life. And I began, people were interested. We talked about it. People made commitments of faith. They were baptized. I wasn't a Catholic at the time, but I was within evangelical Protestantism. And people were responding to what I had to say. When I got out of college, I ended up managing bookstores, because that was another way to get the message out there. I managed Christian bookstores.
That is amazing.
So little by little, I got drawn into the world of media, publishing, and then somebody asked me to pastor a church. And I ended up pastoring a church, and then somebody came and said, how would you like to do a radio show? And I thought, let me try that. And that's what's happened. I've never had to fill out a resume. It's just one thing after another. And I think it's because I was open. The nice thing about coming to know Christ as an early adult is that I was still in college, which meant that I was thinking about my future. And I always wanted my faith to be integrated with my future in some way. And so I had about 2 years to just live out my faith on campus, and then started with the bookstores. I got to know something about writing and publishing and communicating. And then because I did some teaching on the side, this one church asked me to come and candidate, and then they had an election and they elected me to pastor them. And then the radio station that used to sell us advertising at our bookstores, the general manager there said, I like talking to you. Would you like to come on and talk on the radio? So really, that's what happened.
That is, well, listen, it was God.
Yes.
Just working through your life, that you were open to it.
Yeah. It's funny. And it's always been, part of this has been, some people might think that, you're kind of courageous to kind of just flow with it that way. But it hasn't felt like a great exertion of courage. It's just been a willingness to trust that God is there and that he is telling a story through my life. And of course, Sally was one of the early people I shared the gospel with, and she believed in Christ, was baptized, and we ended up marrying. So she's been supportive from the very beginning, and I don't think I could have had the stability to do this work without, being married. I knew I was called to marriage early on.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, when did you become Catholic?
1992. So I was 18 years within evangelical Protestantism.
Okay.
And really, it was the experience of pastoring an independent evangelical church that forced me to ask certain questions about the nature of the church, the role of the pastor, what is spiritual authority? Because I wasn't just a layman anymore. I was ordained as a pastor. What the heck does that mean? And the more I studied Scripture, the more I realized that the Catholic tradition best understood what I saw the New Testament teaching. In the New Testament, the church is universal. It has authority. In other words, you have in Acts chapter 15, you have the Jerusalem Council. So and when they make their decision, it's expected that all the churches are going to adhere to that. So it was a universal authority, universal communion. The Eucharist was central. So and then Peter, that was another shock to me, the centrality of Peter among the apostles. I had never realized that until I preached on the life of Peter. And while I'm reading about Peter, I'm saying, wait a minute, he's not just one of the 12. He's the prince of the apostles. He's the chief of the apostles. So after a while, you begin to say, of the Christian traditions that are out there, which of them insist on universal unity? Which of them insists that there's apostolic succession and a means of maintaining that unity with the apostles? Which of them sees Peter as having a central role in that? Which of them has the Eucharist central to its life? And eventually, you're down to maybe two options, Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy. And there were reasons Eastern Orthodoxy was not an option for me. So I went back to the Catholic Church I'd been baptized into as a baby.
Oh, goodness. So were you a pastor when this happened?
When I became Catholic?
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I resigned. I realized I was going to become a Catholic, and I wasn't at the place where I could lead my congregation in that direction. There were still too many uncertainties.
Yes.
And I didn't feel right about leading them in a direction in which I wasn't certain yet.
Sure.
I don't mind doing that for me or for my family, but they're paying me a salary to preach
I know.
their doctrinal statement, right? So I didn't want to be subversive in that way.
Like the book Surprised by Truth, it reminded me, that what's beautiful, Al, is that really you're coming into the church intellectually. It wasn't some just emotional.
Right.
That's beautiful. God gave you a good mind to really penetrate these things. And
well, there are so many people, as you know, so many people who've gone before us that have pioneered the way.
Oh, yes.
And once you see it, it's like, whoa.
I know.
I want to see. I want to go along. And I've never had a doubt about the truth of Catholic doctrine since I became a Catholic. I've had lots of complaints about the way things work out.
Yeah, sure.
But I've never had a doubt about the coherence, the solidity, the believability of the Catholic truth.
Now, when you started on the radio, were you Catholic then?
No, I was an evangelical pastor.
Okay.
I started in '87.
Okay.
And I returned to the Catholic Church in '92.
Okay.
And for a few years, it was unusual, but I was able to continue doing my work there as the only Catholic in that evangelical setting.
Wonderful.
In fact, when the Detroit Free Press, I think it was the Free Press, maybe it was the News, came out to do a profile on me, at the end of the conversation, the woman who was doing the interview said, "Well, by the way, where do you go to church?" And I said, "Well, I go to St. Suzanne's." She says, are you Catholic? I said, well, yeah, I'm a Catholic.
Isn't that?
And she did not know that. So she wrote it up in the article, and for the next few days, the lines were burning up at the radio station, wondering how I could have become a Catholic.
Isn't that?
And
now, Al, how long were you on the radio before you came to Ann Arbor?
I'd been on the radio 10 years before I came to Ann Arbor. Yeah, 97. I was here in February of 97. You came in April.
We came.
Yeah,
that's right.
I remember. I remember it so well.
Goodness,
Yeah, because we were so impressed with what you were doing, and as the schools were coming along,
and we were impressed with what you were doing.
we decided that Sally was homeschooling at the time, but we stopped homeschooling because we really loved what you were doing with the schools, with the Spirit of Science Academies.
Wonderful. That is wonderful. So, why did you come to Ann Arbor?
I had become Catholic, and while for the first few years I was able to do the program without creating ongoing conflict with my management, my listeners. My contract specified that we're not to make a big deal about our own church affiliation.
I see.
So if people asked a direct question, I give them a direct answer. But you didn't go around waving your flag whether you were a Baptist or a Catholic.
Surely.
Mm-hmm. But eventually it started. As I began to look at American culture and the problems we were facing, the more and more I was convinced that a Christian approach, while would be very good, but a more specifically Catholic solution was required. And so I thought there was no Christian tradition that has thought as deeply about sexuality as the Catholic tradition and John Paul II's theology of the body. And I began to think that it was necessary for me to begin speaking on those distinctively Catholic emphases. And when you've got a largely 90% evangelical Protestant audience, they'll listen for a while, but after a while they begin to think that you're riding your hobby horse.
Yes.
So we prayed for 2 years. We saw this coming, and we prayed for 2 years. And Sally had been on a pilgrimage with Father Ed and members of Christ the King. And we really liked the people there. And I also knew other people from Ann Arbor. Mm-hmm. So we said, well, what would you think of moving to Ann Arbor? I could get back to the Detroit station in about 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. So we said, let's go find a house in Ann Arbor.
Good for you.
So we got ready to buy property in this area, and I got hit with the flu the Christmas of 1996. I couldn't meet with the realtor to lay money down on the property. January comes along. I'm finally back, and I'm back on the air. I feel lousy. But the second week in January, Tom Monahan calls me. At that time, founder of Domino's Pizza, running Domino's Pizza. Yeah. We knew each other. Uh-huh. We weren't close, but we knew each other. And he wanted to know if I would be interested in moving to Ann Arbor to start a media operation. So it was hard to say that God wasn't at work at this.
That's for sure. Thank God.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was in January of 97, and by the end of February 97, we had moved to Ann Arbor that quickly.
And we're so blessed to have you here, Al.
Well,
I mean, we are so blessed. I mean, you've been just such a blessing for the community and all of us. I mean, your example, and tell us about your physical challenge.
Sure.
You've had, God is really like fortifying you for a lot of things. So that was as I can't imagine what Sally went through, but we were in agony also with you.
In fact, I just found the big cards that the kids made here.
Oh, really?
That send me, and we got tremendous. When I was in the hospital, I got extraordinary support from the sisters, from the students at the school. Yeah, what happened? Let me tell you what happened. I was actually in a fairly bad place spiritually, and I knew it, and I was just running on empty. And I hadn't taken time for retreat in a long time. Mm-hmm. And I knew something was going to have to happen. There were too many patterns of, again, drivenness is what, rather than being called, I had a sense of being driven.
Okay.
And that's different than being called.
Mm-hmm.
So my sense of call was getting messed up. And I was beginning to feel driven. I had to do this. I had to accomplish that. I had to manage this thing or that thing. And I was staying up too late. I was getting up too early. I was eating too much. I was drinking too much. I was not spending as much time as I needed to with my kids. And I knew, I said to Sally, I said, something's going to have to give. And I came down with, I came down with a serious, like a strep infection or something. I was flat out on my back, and I began to get a pain in my lower back. That was on a Friday. I missed work that day, and our chaplain sent Gary Zamuda to the house to share the Eucharist with me, you know. And I told Gary, I said, you know, I don't know what's going on, but I think God is going to break some log jam in my life. I just feel it. And I think it's going to take some suffering. And I told Gary that on a Friday.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And he told Sally that, in fact, the following week. And Monday night, the illness had gotten so great that I could no longer walk. The pain, whenever I tried to move in my lower back, was so great. So we went, I didn't know what it was. Nobody knew what it was. We went to St. Joe's. When we got there, my blood pressure had dropped so low that they couldn't even give me any pain relief.
Oh my God.
So overnight, they tried to get my blood pressure up so they could relieve the pain. And it was excruciating. The next morning, I awoke. I felt mildly better. I had pain relief. Father Ed Freedy came by, shared the Eucharist with me. Father John Ricardo dropped by, and we talked a little bit. And I said, I think the Lord is doing something here. I feel incredibly blessed because I did think this was in God's providence and His. I felt like Daddy was spanking me, you know. He loves me enough to squeeze me, and He was giving me a squeeze that was going to break a few bones. But it was because of His love. So I was aware of that, which is a rare, I think fairly rare. And doctors came in. Doctors said to me, Mr. Kresta, you're a very sick man. I said, oh, okay. Well, when will I be able to go home? He said, well, no, we want to show you something. They showed on my left leg that there had been a kind of a purple streak rising up in my leg. It was a few inches long. And they said, hey, that's growing about an inch every hour, I think they said.
Oh my.
I said, I've never seen anything like that before. He said, well, you know, I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go in and do some surgery. We might have to take your leg. And I said, whoa, wait a minute here. I mean, I wasn't counting on that. Can you tell me, I mean, shouldn't we get a second opinion?
Yeah.
And there were about 4 of them gathered around me. And one of them said, well, Mr. Kresta, we don't have time to do that. If we don't start on the next 20 minutes getting started, you may be dead in the next 3 hours.
Oh,
So that's what they told me. Well, at that point, you don't have much choice.
Yeah.
It's your leg or your
your
life,
life.
right? So we got, I got prepared. They did all the work to bring me into surgery. Again, God's grace was present at that time. I wasn't terrified at all. I did not want to think about the children. I kind of avoided that because I thought that might destabilize me. But I did see Sal, and we talked. I thought she gave me a kiss just before I went into surgery, but apparently it was some other woman.
Goodness.
I don't know who that was.
Yeah.
She says no. But I went into surgery, and I didn't wake up for 5 days. I remained unconscious, and they kept me subdued for 5 days. And when I got up, when I first awakened, my daughter was there, and my son James was there. And they told me that Sally was on the 5th floor of the hospital.
I remember.
And they
that,
thought
yeah.
that she had the same thing.
Yeah, I remember.
And I didn't even, at that time, I was still getting used to the thing, necrotizing fasciitis, whatever that was,
Yeah.
flesh-eating bacteria. And I was thinking, wait a minute, is that contagious? They said, no. I said, well, how would she get it? Anyways, she didn't, they finally decided she didn't have that. But I was in the hospital for 10 weeks after that. And I was, for the next 6 months, I was very conscious of being lifted up by the prayers of God's people. And while I had, obviously in a situation like that as a Catholic, you're trying to lift up, you're trying to unite your sufferings with that of Jesus.
Yeah.
And it was difficult because your attention span is shot, and you're, I was trying, I didn't do it very well, but I was glad I was trying at all to do it. And Catherine of Siena has a statement which says something like, if you're experiencing distractions in prayer, well, you're going to experience distractions when you're trying to offer up your sufferings as well. That was helpful because I said, I get distracted in prayer all the time. So I'm going to get distracted offering up this. Sally was a big help. She came and of the many things she told me, she said, he brought me a quote from St. Ignatius Loyola, which was, discouragement is never from God because it blocks out all the bright rays of hope. And disappointment is one thing. Discouragement is something entirely different. And so that really gave me the courage to fight back whenever it came on me, being discouraged. And 10 weeks later, I came home, and eventually the wound healed, and I began going back to work.
Al, you said the most incredible thing that I think is just for all of us to know, all people, initially, maybe not the way that, the extreme way that God did it, but that you recognized that suffering would be beneficial to you.
Yeah.
If we could just think about that, I'm a firm believer in that. I mean, although none of us, want it, but there's nothing that makes a person, the character of a person, stronger than to go through suffering. But the fact that you recognized it and welcomed it, in effect, maybe not the extreme,
Right,
but
right.
that's beautiful. That's something that all of us should know.
I think it was a grace. I think it was a grace because
I couldn't believe it when you said. I thought,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, to know that you needed something to get your life, on the right track.
I had a period of intense suffering back in 1982, and that turned out to be a baptism into suffering, which then equipped me to begin doing pastoral work. So I had the blessing again of seeing a connection.
That's wonderful.
And I always remind people. I said, you don't always get it as clearly as I had it, and I'm very grateful, because if I didn't see the connection so clearly, I think I'd be tempted to doubt, because suffering is suffering.
Al, I just want to thank you for coming over and bringing your lovely wife. It's like old times, because we don't see each other that much.
I don't.
But you're such a gift to the community, to our community, and also the local community or the worldwide, whoever hears you on the radio.
Well, thank you, Mother.
You speak with a clear voice and a brilliant mind. So God bless you. Thank you.
You and your sisters have given my whole family a vision of the consecrated life that has been an encouragement for us, and also has helped strengthen the plausibility of the faith. So thank you.
Thank you. God bless.